Help me reach 1,000 subscribes. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every comment. Thanks. I never thought a sentence said in anger could erase a face from your life. Yet one careless line did exactly that. My name is Emily, and until last winter, I believed my marriage was sturdy, if a little worn. Mark and I had been together 12 years, married for 9. He was quiet, dependable, the kind of man who fixed things instead of talking about feelings. I used to say that steadiness was what I loved most. Somewhere along the way, I started resenting it. The night it happened was ordinary. Bills on the table, dishes dry in the rack, the television murmuring in the background. Mark came home late from the garage, grease under his nails, shoulders slumped. He mentioned his supervisor had laughed at him in front of the crew. I barely looked up from my phone. I was tired of carrying conversations, tired of what I told myself was his passivity. When he sighed and said he felt invisible at work, something sharp rose in me. I said he should stand up for himself. He said he tried. I laughed, a short, ugly sound, and told him maybe he just wasn't man enough to command respect. The words landed heavier than I expected, but I kept going. I said he lacked backbone, drive, presence. I said other husbands didn't get treated like doormats. I said things I can't take back. Mark didn't shout. He didn't defend himself. He just went very still, as if someone had turned off a switch. He walked past me, without another word, and shut himself in the spare bedroom. I assumed he needed space. The next morning, he was gone before sunrise. That evening, he returned, cooked dinner, and ate standing at the counter with his back to me. When I asked what he wanted to talk about, he said nothing. He stopped meeting my eyes. If I entered a room, he found a reason to leave it. It was like living with a stranger who knew all my habits. Days turned into weeks. He handled the house, the errands, the routines, but erased himself from me. When I tried to apologize, he said he heard me, then turned away. I started noticing things I had taken for granted. The way he used to check the locks at night. The way he warmed the car for me in winter. The way he used to reach for my hand in crowds. All gone, quietly withdrawn. I told myself he was punishing me. I told myself he was overreacting. Yet every attempt to provoke a response failed. Anger would have been easier. Silence felt surgical. One evening, I followed him into the garage and stood between him and the workbench. I asked if he even loved me anymore. He looked at the wall above my shoulder and said love didn't survive contempt. Then he picked up his tools and walked around me like I wasn't there. That was the moment fear crept in. I realized I had attacked something fragile and private, something men rarely show. I had mocked a part of him that felt small already. I began replaying the night in my head, wishing I could swallow the words back. I left notes. I cooked his favorite meals. I cried where he couldn't see. Nothing moved him. The breaking point came when my sister visited and noticed attention. She pulled me aside and asked what I'd done. When I told her, she went quiet. She said men can forgive many things, but humiliation cuts deeper than anger. That night, I found an envelope on the kitchen table with my name on it. Inside was a single page, written in Mark's careful handwriting. He said he wasn't leaving yet, but he was done being seen through my eyes. He needed distance to remember who he was without my voice in his head. I sat on the floor and understood that my insult hadn't just hurt him. It had rewritten the marriage, and I didn't yet know whether there was any way back. I slept on the couch, listening to his footsteps move through the house like a map I could no longer read. Each sound reminded me that damage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's precise, permanent, and self-inflicted. I waited for morning, hoping for forgiveness, but fearing the man who avoided my face had already left me in every way that mattered long before I dared to admit the truth fully. Morning came without relief. Mark moved through the house with the same quiet efficiency, showering, dressing, pouring coffee, never once looking at me. I watched him from the doorway, like a guest overstaying her welcome. When the door closed behind him, the silence felt heavier than before. I realized I had mistaken his withdrawal for cruelty. It wasn't. It was self-preservation. I took the day off work and sat alone, confronting truths I'd avoided. I had wanted Mark to be louder, bolder, more assertive, but I had never asked why he wasn't. I had compared him to men I saw in fragments, confident smiles and surface strength, without knowing their private failures. In doing so, I reduced a man who had loved me steadily into a caricature, then mocked it. That cruelty belonged to me. By the third day, the house itself felt accusatory. Every object carried memory. The coat he used to drape over my chair, the mug he bought because it reminded him of a trip we took, the loose screw he had promised to tighten. I understood then that contempt doesn't arrive suddenly. It grows quietly, fed by impatience and comparison, until it becomes language. And once spoken, it rearranges everything it touches. When Mark returned that evening, I didn't block his path or demand conversation. I asked if we could sit, and if he said no, I would respect it. He hesitated, then nodded once. We sat at opposite ends of the couch, space between us like a border. I told him I understood now that I had attacked his dignity, not his behavior. I told him I was ashamed. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I told him I knew I wasn't owed it. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he took a long breath and finally looked at me. His eyes weren't angry. They were tired. He said he had spent weeks replaying my words, hearing them at work, in traffic, in quiet moments. He said the hardest part wasn't the insult, but realizing I saw in the way he feared others did. Small, replaceable. He said something inside him closed at night to protect what was left of his self-respect. I asked what he wanted. He said he wanted to rebuild himself before rebuilding us. He needed therapy, space, time, and honesty, even when it was uncomfortable. He said if we continued, it would be slower, quieter, and on different terms. I agreed, knowing agreement didn't guarantee survival. The weeks that followed were humbling. Mark started counseling. He spoke more there than he ever had with me. I learned to listen without correcting, without shaping his feelings into something easier for me to hear. Some nights he slept beside me. Some nights he didn't. I stopped measuring progress in affection and started measuring it in trust. One evening, months later, we attended a small gathering. Someone made a joke at Mark's expense. Before I could react, Mark calmly shut it down. No anger, no bravado, just presence. I watched something solid settle into him, something I hadn't broken, only buried. Later, in the car, he reached for my hand. It wasn't forgiveness. It was allowance. I understand now that manhood isn't volume or dominance. It's integrity under pressure, resilience after harm, and the courage to walk away from contempt, even when it comes from someone you love. Mark faced himself when he refused to face me. That distance forced me to do the same. There were setbacks, days when Mark retreated again, when silence returned and fear followed it. I learned not to chase reassurance. I learned that repair isn't performance, and remorse isn't loud. It's consistent. It shows up quietly, every day, without demanding applause. That lesson alone changed me more than any apology ever could. Growth doesn't erase harm, but it can build something sturdier in its place. I hold that truth now, knowing love survives only where respect is protected. And that protection begins with restraint, humility, and the willingness to confront yourself before demanding anything from another person.